Do this.
For sure. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast. Today, we're peeling back the layers on something often discussed in hushed tones, but rarely mastered. It's an absolute honor to have Brian Wong join us today. He is a Canadian founder and CEO residing in New York. He graduated college at 18, then built Kiip, a mobile advertising platform. And then he also wrote a book called The Cheat Code. And now through Brian Wong Growth Ventures, he helps other entrepreneurs for Web 2 and Web 3, peeling back investments and advisory. So Brian, it's an absolute honor to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me. No, I think very excited to share more to help other upstarters, folks that are trying to build their own businesses, be resourceful, get ahead. Obviously, my book, I'm sure we'll dive into. But yeah, I'm very excited to share more and more to help your audience.
Okay, well, good. All right, man. Well, I mean, your journey is really nothing short of extraordinary. From building a massive ad platform to now guiding founders through growth. I've seen it all today. So I want to explore just not the capital side of growth, but something you've more recently championed, the critical role of public speaking and communications to help founder success and how it directly impacts their marketing and ability to scale. So I know you're really, really focused on the communication aspects of that and helping founders. What are you doing right now, or what are you seeing that's really working, or kind of how are you helping them?
Totally. I think it's good just to give the backstory of why I landed on communications, public speaking, being comfortable in front of audiences, being able to succinctly tell your story as one of the bigger ways to move the needle for people who are in the business world or are trying to start their own businesses as the main thing. And the way it came to fruition was, as a kid, I actually was classically trained in speech arts and in drama and duologues and monologues. There's actually an area of improv and theater that focuses on that. And I actually went to classes for that, and I competed in that world for a few years. And this actually helped, I realize, with my memory, ability to feel comfortable in front of audiences, of course, and then also to perform under pressure. So I had the chance to go through that as a kid and apply all that in the business world later on. And I realized not a lot of people had that. My parents actually decided to put me in that program mainly because they were worried that their accent would rub off on me. So as an immigrant child, my parents are from Hong Kong. They moved over, and I was born in Vancouver. And realizing that being in North America, if I had grown up with an accent, they thought it would potentially be problematic. And to their infinite wisdom, they were like, "You should be in this program." So I had that privilege of being able to do that. And so now looking back, I was like, that was one of the things that was so hidden, but is actually so pivotal and so important, I think, in some of the bigger moments in my business career. That being said, you mentioned I have BW Growth. I now have a VC fund called Kiip Ventures. It's a $25 million fund that focuses on boring businesses. We invest in boring enterprise businesses. It sells to other companies, not consumer. And I meet a lot of founders in my day-to-day, and I try my best both in the fund and in day-to-day to try to help out folks. And we actually have a program called The Next Stage that you can apply for on my website at brianwong.co that allows you to go through my public speaking program. And I'm not saying it's not open to everybody. It is. But there is a strong, I'd say, concentration of founders that have gone through that program that are BIPOC or are not originally born in the U.S. or from a family that's natively English speaking. So that being said, that's how I landed on the public speaking part, and why I think that can be super valuable for founders and business people alike to really hone in on and really get to master.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, public speaking is everything. And I think it's probably one of the hardest things for people to really grasp and master. Even myself back in, high school and college and everything like that, I think public speaking was, it was worse than I rather went and jumped off a building or, jumped out of a plane than did public speaking and demonized it. But then as I got more comfortable with it, then like you said, it just helped me in business a little bit more, helped me connect with people. And, that's really the most important part
of business. This podcast, I'm sure, has helped. And you've done hours and hours and hours of this, right? And so the number one tip I like to share with folks is it all comes from practice. Nothing comes naturally in this regard, right? You look at the world's best public speakers, think of the Tony Robbins of the world. he didn't just start off like that. It had to come habitually, right? And that is where a big part of the energy from perfecting your public speaking can come from. And so for me, it's practice. It's getting the habit of feeling uncomfortable in front of groups, taking the opportunity to do this anytime you're in any environment, right? So raising your hand to pitch, to be the person to represent the group, right? Remember in college with group projects, a lot of people would just be very hesitant to present, right? And who was the first to raise their hand? It was me, because I was like, well, this would be great practice. And especially in a class setting, no one cares if you mess up, right? It's not really a matter of being focused on being perfect. So to me, that's a very, very big tip. And I'm happy to share a couple more. I don't want to overly bombard people with these tips right now.
So you state that one of the biggest drivers in success in business is the ability to communicate publicly. So many founders focus on products, sales, other things. Why is public communication so critical and often underestimated in any type of, growing a business for any entrepreneur?
I think there's almost this assumption of like, it should be easy. Shouldn't you just understand what I'm saying? Like talking is what people do every day. Like you go out to order a cup of coffee from Starbucks and you're talking to somebody. So you're expecting that because it's just so easy because we all communicate, that it shouldn't necessarily need to be something that's focused on. And to that, I basically say you'd be very surprised at how much science goes into analyzing how communications in just advertising a product, for example, in copywriting is so critical, right? Just when you look at the Apple announcement from last week or earlier this week, there are so many things about how they communicated the new product that was masterfully done. I mean, to be honest, the product itself was pretty underwhelming, but the way to describe it is pretty damn good. And Apple's really good at copywriting. So you think about the amount of focus that goes into copywriting. Imagine that amount of focus and energy and perfection should be going into your ability to market yourself, right? So when you think about the hierarchy of things that I would say you need to focus on, yes, as a person trying to make it work in the business world, you have your company, you have your products, you have your services, you have the thing that you're doing. Totally get it. But the halo effect beyond that of your person, of your story, of where you come from, of why you do what you do is more important, in my opinion, because that speaks for you when you're not in the room. What is your background? Why do people remember you? For me to come to you and say, hey, I'm a coach or I'm a salesperson or I have these things I do, that's awesome. But the context of it will make you memorable. And that's how I make it important for people. When I intentionally tell people I'm Canadian, I play golf, I graduated college at 18, there's a reason why I share these storyline items, not to brag, but to give context of who I am and give people reasons to relate. From a personal brand standpoint, having started a company in mobile advertising, having worked with hundreds of CMOs, invested personally into 34 companies, having built companies from, 0 to 500 million in revenue, that type of stuff gives people also I'd say sound bites to hook onto, to remember. And that becomes part of your ability to rattle these things off when you're in that elevator pitch mode. To be frank, most people don't have that much attention. And when you are in front of them within 20 seconds, can you say something or leave them with something that makes it so that they'll remember you beyond that 20 seconds? And that should be your first goal in this type of communications exercise.
So throughout Kiip, going through college, everything you've done so far, like when did you, and I know that you started off, when you were younger doing like the public speaking and voice, classes and all that stuff. But when did you really kind of identify that public speaking and the way that you talk to people and your inflection and everything about how you communicate? When did you figure out that that was so important in business?
Yeah, it was in pitching my company for VC funding, right? The first time I started going out to Sand Hill Road to meet angel investors, I realized it was basically just you being a broken record, repeating yourself over and over again. That's basically what it is, right? But you can either be a machine and just repeat yourself word for word and drone on and be this, repetitive, unemotional thing, or you can change it, add energy to it, intonate, be interesting, be exciting, use energy, and take advantage of the fact that you're in person. And that allowed me to differentiate. Naturally, as a person, I'm energetic, right? And you can tell over the phone, but in person, the energy is even more palpable. And I said to myself, I need to use this to my advantage because it'll help me remain memorable. And being younger when I started, energy and youth is naturally quite aligned, right? And now that I've gotten older, and I'm saying older, not old, because I think I'm still pretty young, but the alignment of you being energetic based on just your mindset has now become where I've landed, right? It's the youthful mindset that people get attracted to. You will still meet people who are much older, but have this youthful energy. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of these people out there that you just want to gravitate to. And then I realized, okay, if I'm energetic, people want to hang out with me. Naturally, success can follow. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but being able to rally people around you and want them to work with you is a key factor to success as well. So communications now, if you think about the thought track here, has now led to your ability to attract and retain a team, which is also a critical part of your ability to perform as a business person, right? You're never going to do this all alone. No one's going anywhere alone. There are very important parts of success. One of them being able to communicate your idea, but then also retaining and attracting world-class people around you. And communications is part of both of those. And that was a big part of the realization was when I was pitching my company to these investors for the first time. Then the second moment was in selling our product, right? Like when you're going out there, sales is not just, hey, here's the product and I'm going to give you information about it and go buy it, right? I then realized sales was, again, a communication art. It was the why. It was understanding their needs first, understanding their timing first, mapping that out in your mind. Because the best analogy I always give is the water bottle that you can buy in any grocery store versus the water bottle you're buying at a concert festival. You really need that water bottle when it's the only water available and it costs you $10. You're going to spend it. But you walk by 5 bodegas in New York, $2 for a bottle of water is whatever, right? So it's like really the context of selling that makes selling so important, and recognizing that as a communicator and then being able to communicate that is pretty important as well.
Yep, I definitely agree. I mean, so now being able to communicate things to, I mean, you mentioned, to your staff or if you own a business, to talk to your employees, things like that, which is also crucial. So your next stage program kind of helps people more, be comfortable more on stage, covering topics like developing your own speaking style. And for a founder, how does developing your unique style of communication, how do you think that really, changes their direction or kind of the company?
That's a great question because it is the key, right? There's what you've outlined is the stage of internal communications and external, right? So what we've covered so far is a lot of external, selling to other people, selling to investors, selling to prospective customers, and then even existing customers. But then there's internal around rallying your own team and presenting your ideas and getting buy-in, right? Especially folks that work at bigger companies. Buy-in is everything. Buy-in is life. If you don't get buy-in, you're toast. You will be a dud and you will never get anywhere. And maybe you do want to be just mediocre and hang out and collect a paycheck and go home and call it a day. But that's not the type of person that I'm trying to attract into this program, obviously. Someone who's a little bit more ambitious, let's put it that way. So when you look at the style, that's the key. People will ask me a lot, Brian, you mentioned this accent thing. Well, I have an accent. Well, your program sucks because they don't say that. I'm just making this up. This is not applicable to me because I have an accent and I'm never going to be able to be that effective at communicating. I'm like, hello, there are plenty of people with accents that are extremely charismatic and effective communicators. The Dalai Lama, I'm just going to use the most famous of examples, right? The dude has a pretty thick accent, but when he opens his mouth, everyone listens, right? And it's so incredible the way he communicates, and he is one of many in the master class of communications of leveraging your style. Like I said, my style involves high energy, intonation changes, speeding up, slowing down, leaving people with sound bites, my background, my ability to maybe do some self-deprecating humor in general. That's part of my style. Other people might be more reserved. They might be shyer. They might be quieter, but that would be then the style they should embrace is fewer words, lower energy, but calm, almost rhythmic, almost, I would say the word trance-like inducing speaking. And people are like that too. Like you might meet somebody, my God, I'm like, feel like I'm being put under a spell. And that is part of their style, right? And to me, that is the style you then embrace, right? And then once you embrace it, it has to be super reflective of who you are, and it has to be consistent. right? It's very difficult to just switch your style because then it looks disingenuous. It looks like you're acting different characters all the time, right? You kind of consistently have to be that style. Like Gary Vee has been Gary Vee his entire life, right? There's really, you look at videos when he was selling Wine Library TV to now, he's the same dude through and throughout. Nothing has changed other than maybe a little bit less swearing. But the point is, he's kind of consistently manifested this style, which is really, really important.
Yeah. I think another one that comes to mind, or, to my top mind, and maybe it's just because I just bought all of this stuff like 3 weeks ago, is Alex Ramosi. Is just unapologetically him. I mean, just walking around looking like almost like a hobo in a tank top with the Breathe Right nose strip on it, and, long hair, and just doesn't care. That's just who he is. And
the word is unapologetic.
Yep.
The word is unapologetic. I think it's important to be unapologetic and fully embracing, right? And I don't want to sound like a shrink, but my therapist does say self-compassion, self-love is a very important part of our development as people and part of our ability to heal. Like, we all have things we go through. And if you don't love your own character, how you've become, first of all, you can't change it either. That's the other thing I think people don't recognize. Your lived past, you are not going to change that. That will always be permanent. Your past is there. And however, how you developed, everything you've experienced is that story that you can tell that is always going to be unique. Why would you try to tell a story of someone else's when yours is going to be as unique as the next guy's? So tell it as it is. This is who I was. This is what happened. This is how I built my career. And if you're interested in hearing what I have to say because it's unique, and then you will pay attention. And that's also the one more really great nugget that my book publisher once told me. And it was such a simple statement. Was she had mentioned people buy books is because it's a story that's told from a unique perspective. Right? Like, you want to hear the F1 story not by some random fan as a bystander, but the F1 story from the driver, or the mom and the dad of the driver, or the whatever. These are unique perspectives of the same story, right? And that's where you get the best, most interesting things. And if you embrace that unique perspective, people will want to hear it. And that's why even people who are foreign, I say the best part is your accent already signals to people that you have knowledge of two cultures. Right? If you just have a plain Jane vanilla American accent, perhaps your only understanding of the culture would be North American culture. But if you came from Africa or Southeast Asia or, South America, wherever you're from, your perspective will encompass both naturally. And that gives you a strength. Which leads me to this final point on that also came from my book, which is this idea of embracing your weaknesses and turning them into strengths, right? That your most people's weaknesses actually are strengths. They refuse to view it that way because they either look at it as a crutch or they've been really easily hiding behind it. And I think the self-introspection process here is to recognize, what have you been hiding behind? What is holding you back, right? Plenty of friends that I had grown up with in Canada, I would always ask them, why don't you want to come down to the US, right? I'm not saying that Canada's not great. I'm saying Canada's great as a nation. From a business opportunity standpoint, in certain careers, it is definitely a better idea to not be doing it in Canada. And I said, hey, why don't you move down? Like, wow, isn't the visa hard to get? I'm like, guys, just try it. What's the worst that could happen? You don't get the visa? Well, you weren't going to get the visa in the first place then, because if you didn't do it, you weren't going to get it. So there's nothing to lose if you embrace your weaknesses and really focus on turning those and converting those into strengths.
It's like, your program or whatever, and I've already, looked at it and had this next question coming up, and you touched on it like perfectly. Now, it was about storytelling and getting across someone's unique story to help them be more marketable. So do you have any kind of unique tips for anyone to really harness their unique story and then use that to attract investors or sound more relatable to their employees, or just better off, be more communicatable?
Yeah, I think your story comes from recognizing and recollecting all of your past successes and failures. And more importantly, the failures. There's a reason why there's this obsession of America in reading juicy gossip, because you hear about the things that went wrong. And frankly, those are the ones that are the most memorable. If someone came up to you, is like, everything's great. My wife is super happy with me. My company's doing great. My kids love me. And, my parents are super healthy. And We own very non-problematic property, and I play sports perfectly. You're like, dude, this dude is boring, right? So there's almost this like, how do I embrace the imperfections and the misses and the struggles and the process to overcome those is your story. It really is. There is no such thing as no story from a struggle. So I would start with that. Most people will start with their journey to America. Most people will start with their journey to their first success. Most people could start with their passions that go outside of work. One question I love whenever I'm at these networking events is I'll ask, what is your story? And then people will ask me back, what do you mean, what is my story? Like, where do you want me to start? I said, wherever you want to start, right? And you would be very, very surprised to know that most people's stories start with their passions. They'll just go off on, I love sailing, right? And I was just out with my wife, in wherever in Cape Cod and did this and that. And I'm like, awesome. And then tell me more about this and that. Or someone will be like, I love running and I just ran this half marathon. I've been training for it. And then when you start off with that, it's so disarming. It's so innocent. It's such a low pressure way to get to know somebody. And it comes from these stories that they start to tell.
I mean, someone's story, I think, is probably the easiest way for them to communicate something creative and, unique about themselves. Just going back to either, like you said, failures, but probably they're going to go back to something that, unique about them or like what they did. If I was in like a marketing area or networking, I'm going to talk about, my skiing. Talked about being from Vancouver, my number one spot in my head was like, oh man, skiing. I love BC. I love, Canada. I have literally a tattoo of Moraine Lake on my right, on my shoulder. So
that's great. I'm a huge skier, dude. I'm an icon holder. I do as many of the icon mountains as I can every year. I don't have a lot of great skiing near New York, so I got to fly out for it. But yeah, and then I could go on for, just obviously for demonstrative purposes. You and I could talk about skiing for probably a couple hours if we wanted to. And one thing I also explain to people too, when they first come here or when they move here, is American networking culture is definitely surround hobbies and shared interests. And you need to assimilate to the culture in certain ways. Like, I'm not saying convert and be American and just don't be conscious of your own culture, but certainly try to start doing things. Like if it's pickleball, go for it, right? If it's golf, whatever it is. For me, it ended up being golf, skiing, and ice hockey. Those are the three things that are part of my everyday hobbies. That's a lot, and I just played hockey last night in the beer leagues. Our ice times are like 11:30 at night. And like when I mentioned that, like a lot of the guys that I'll meet that are from, all the states, right? Massachusetts, Michigan, Maine, they'll laugh about it. They'll be like, yeah, my beer leagues, we start our ice time is like at like 11 PM. Like, you're wired until 2 a.m. And then immediately you have this, like, you're like relating to it. And it is really part of it. And that's why I tell people to be aware. Even if you don't have those hobbies, if you actually partake, go to a hockey game, go to a basketball game, go to a football game, go watch some American movies, go hang out at festivals like Tribeca Film Festival, know what's going on, and go to art fairs. Just be aware. If you're totally, just closed off and completely in your own bubble and completely unaware of what's going on, it makes you, frankly, less interesting. So for me to even know, for example, in my hobbies, like, of course, Ryder Cup is coming up for golf. Again, if someone's a golf fan and that I'm going to Ryder Cup, they're going to love it. It'd be like instant bonding. And then, because then the conversation is going to go up about, US versus Europe and the team captain and, and the Full Swing documentary, and where Keegan was not allowed on the team and now he's the captain. And like, it's just hilarious. But the only way that I would know this is I'm watching things, I'm part of the culture, I'm being involved. And it does take time, but I don't do those things because I'm like trying to come up with conversational material to talk to people. I'm doing it because I'm genuinely interested in it. So I think developing these genuine interests in these certain areas that are outside of work is always critical in being able to just relate to other people. I think it's really just the human to human relations that I think people have to recognize. And it comes with these very genuine desires to be interested in things. I know it sounds so vague, but it's literally the best way to do it.
No, absolutely. I mean, right when you said skiing, it's like, oh, my guard went down a little bit. Like, I can relate to this guy. I know how to talk.
Exactly.
I mean, I've skied literally since 6 years old. I was on the Buck Hill ski team with Lindsey Vonn. So now we're actually our coach. Unfortunately, well, he was 99 years old. God bless his soul, skiing until he was like 98. Eric Seiler,
awesome.
the great Eric Seiler, just passed away. So we have a memorial in a couple weeks at Buck Hill for him. So that's going to be super cool. I'm going to be surrounded by a lot of like-minded people and kind of network there and talk to people and just kind of remember the guy who taught us all how to ski, even at like 78 years old when he taught us to ski. It's crazy.
And a lot of these sports have parallels, right? So even if you're just into skiing, there's all these other things that people do that they'll go extreme on that there's like almost this mutual respect, right? Like if I know someone's super into XYZ sport, let's say I don't know anything about padel, let's say I don't know anything about tennis, there's still the parallels, and it's a good filter of people knowing that at least you are interesting as a person, right? You have other stuff you do that isn't just I'm sitting in front of a computer and trying to like just kill myself working every day. There's this interesting unspoken of mutual respect of those who are well-rounded.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy. All right, so let's talk about, we got a little bit longer, kind of about, I know that one of your main things is kind of helping, companies growing, acquisition of companies, investing, but more so with growth. So, I mean, and I know that you mentioned kind of the arts and science behind growth. So from your vantage point as both an investor and a founder, what is one of the key art aspects of growth that's kind of often overlooked by companies?
Yeah, so I put growth ventures being the way I kind of hung my shingle because nobody doesn't want to grow, if that makes sense. Like everyone looks at growth as a positive thing. And the art of growth that I see is people. And it's getting the right people to give you exponential returns. And to be more tactical, so I don't sound super cliche, because everyone's always like, get the right people. Like, okay, I know. I know. It's almost like say, breathe air and, go out in the sun and drink water. Like, yes, thank you, Captain Obvious. But what I mean by the people part is how you can unlock loyalty and exponential work output with the people that you work with, right? So you can actually hire an A player who absolutely hates their job because you've created a terrible environment or the thing they're working on sucks, and you will not get the right output. And it doesn't matter how great somebody is, you have to unlock that output. And the way you do that is by having them tell you what they are great at doing. And if they tell you how great they are and it aligns with the thing you want somebody to do, then they're the right fit. So in all the roles that we hire for across our companies, I always ask them to write their own job description. I ask them to write their own 30, 60, 90 plan. And I ask them to create the plan that they believe they can be successful at. And if it misaligns, then they're not hiring. It's not, and it's not a failure. It's just, we are not the right fit for what we know you're going to be really good at, right? It's like hiring a fisherman to cut down a tree. What the hell is that person going to do for you? That's not their expertise. That's not what they're going to be good at. So you need to be finding the right expertise that overlaps properly. Not just expertise, sorry. As I said earlier, it's what you know you can exponentially deliver at. I know I can exponentially deliver at, as you can tell, spreading the good word on helping people get ahead, pitching ideas, getting people excited about ideas. That's always been my superpower. And if you have me sit at a spreadsheet all day, and I told people this, if you put a gun to my head and you want me to do a pivot table, I'll figure it out. That's not a good use of my time. That is not exponential output for me. So if we can give that person the power to tell you what their exponential output would be, then you unlock that exponential output, which equals growth, right? And part of it is when they suggest it and you actually end up liking the ideas that they give you and adopting them, the ownership part, making people feel like they own it is really the key to exponential growth on the art side. Anytime it involves people, I always think of it as an art form because there's no formula for people, right? There's no X plus Y equals C. There's no way. To me, that is the art part.
Very interesting. I love it. It's the way you think about things and kind of tie it back. It's obviously so obvious, but you don't think about it that way. And sometimes you're always going in a different aspect of it. You're going to try to take that person and just jam it into that job, force it, and it obviously doesn't work. And then you blame, that person and not yourself.
Way out. I don't blame them either, because when you have a job description, you have a role you want to fill, you want to take the person and fill them in the role. That's even the terminology we use, fill the role, right? That's not, I don't think that's the right terminology, right?
Right.
And so there's so many interesting adages that come from the classical way of doing business that I think has led to Obviously, in an industrialized sense, successes in filling roles for new grads, coming out of programs and, going to Deloitte and KPMG and, whatever. But like when it comes to everyday business where there's a little more, je ne sais quoi, you can't just do the come here and do this job. And again, it might work for about, 6 months, but the person's going to flame out and you're going to lose them. And that's not a great way to run a company if you're losing people every 6 months.
Yeah, that's definitely a hard thing to turn over that many people and keep trying to fill those spots. And
the problem perpetuates itself, right? You just recognize it gets worse and worse and worse.
Well, yeah. I mean, I used to be in a restaurant business. I used to be in a former life. I was an executive chef for a couple of restaurants. I was a executive chef for Nordstrom, things like that. And, in that job and in that role or that kind of industry, you almost have to take people and just kind of jam them into roles just because you don't have a choice. But the overturn in those industries is just, it's absolutely insane. And it takes a wear and tear on you. So, I mean, if it's not a good fit.
You're absolutely right. And then what I would say, though, as well, is there are the rare businesses that have figured out culturally how to maintain that hiring philosophy to the very ends of the earth, right? Think Chick-fil-A, right? You literally can go to any Chick-fil-A and everyone's like, hi. Well, you're like almost like a fake, like they're just so fake. You're like, how are you so damn happy every day? And this, you're talking as an entry-level job, right? It's the memorable nature. And I could go on and on about this, but we're running out of time. But I actually went to Chick-fil-A HQ. I know why they were able to hire like that. I actually know why. It's insane. And it's not an accident, right? Yeah. Same as In-N-Out. It's not an accident why everyone in In-N-Out is so damn nice, right? And then why you go to a CVS and everyone's just miserable, right? There's a combination. There's a reason why. There's always a reason. And these are the companies and again, here's also the stylistic thing of the art of it. It's not like CVS is not successful. CVS is obviously very successful. But when you look at Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out and the amount of marketing and the amount of additional expense they have to put in to make people love their brand is significantly less than what CVS has to do, right? And also the businesses are a bit different. Like obviously me needing to go and get a bunch of ibuprofen is very different than me choosing between eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich versus, a Burger King, right? It's a bit of a different business, but you get what I mean? Like there's these very memorable people that work at certain high scale, high throughput businesses that are still very, very well hired. And those are case studies that are definitely worth paying attention to.
I definitely agree. All right. One last question. I know we're running out of time, and this one is going to be a little more broad, and it doesn't really matter where it goes. But Brian, if you could distill all of your experiences from building Kiip, writing the cheat code, and now advising countless founders in one single piece of advice to entrepreneurs, how to dramatically accelerate their growth, what would be that cheat code?
Cold messaging and cold emailing. It still is my favorite tactic of all time. It still works brilliantly. And it's cold emailing and cold LinkedIn adding and cold Twitter DMing and whatever it is. And obviously to a limit, like you can't be so annoying that you're accused of being harassing them. But there is this beauty to a well-written, again, not AI. Please don't use AI for this. You will fail. I can tell you point blank, of a well-written, authentic note to someone who normally doesn't get cold emails too, right? So think of the CEOs themselves of these major companies and even the board members. So one thing that people still don't do, and I can't believe I gave away this, years and years ago, and people still don't do it. You know who's higher level than the CEO of Nordstrom? The board of Nordstrom, right? So if you find all the people who sit on the board and you figure out how to email them, you would be shocked at how quickly you can get results. And when your email comes in, it's not, hey, I'm Brian, I want to work with you, or hi, I'm Brian, hire me. Dude, I get so livid when I see people send these emails. It's like, give me a job. I'm like, what do I owe you? I don't owe you anything, man. Like, but if you come to me and say, hey, Brian, I have this feedback, I went through one of your portfolio companies. They did this and that. This UI sucks. And not only does it suck, here's my suggestion on how to fix it.
There you go.
Then I'll be like, well, why don't you fix it and we'll pay you to do it? Boom, here's an opportunity. It's so easy. And then people always just fail at this. They go, well, no one owes you anything. And the only way you can make them owe you something is by telling them something they're doing wrong that you can fix. So that is the easiest hack / cheat code that I still subscribe to this very day.
Well, I think that's a gem right there. I mean, yeah, I I think we'll just end on that. I mean, Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad I got connected with you and actually, extended the olive branch and you accepted, and I really greatly appreciate it. So if they want to find you, I know you mentioned it real quickly, website, Instagram, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so it's just brianwong.co. And then if you want to add me on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and that's a great way to find me. I think I'm usually the first Brian Wong that shows up, which is great. Yeah, looking forward to connecting to your audience, and thanks for having me on, Alex.
All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Brian. Have a good day. See ya.